morning. I'd like to welcome everyone to the May 10th, 2022 Planning Commission meeting, and I'd like to call the meeting to order. My name is Ken Beeson. I'm the chair of the Eugene Planning Commission. Tonight, we're holding a public hearing on two appeals, the Eugene Historic Review Board's decision approving concurrent applications for a historic demolition, historic alteration, and an adjustment review to allow for development of 123 units of low-income housing. As we get started, I'd like to thank everybody for joining us. We're in this remote meeting format that allows us to complete our business while we keep the staff, the commission, and the public safe. Anybody who wants to access this meeting can do so. You can watch the live stream available on our website or the broadcast on Comcast Channel 21, or you can follow the access instructions listed on the agenda for the meeting. As we get started, the Eugene Code requires that planning commissioners disclose any conflicts of interest, ex parte contacts, biases, or abstentions. And in a quasi-judicial proceeding like this one, the parties are entitled to an impartial or a neutral decision maker. To ensure this fair consideration, the Eugene Code and the Planning Commission rules attempt to limit ex parte contacts or communications between a party and a decision maker outside the public hearing process. Each planning commissioner must disclose and must describe the substance of any communication they've had about this application outside the public process. Commissioners must also disclose any conflicts of interest, that is, whether the decision they're about to make could or would result in a personal financial gain to themselves, their business, or a member of their household. And finally, a planning commissioner cannot participate if she or he is biased, that is, for whatever reason, if he or she is incapable of rendering an objective decision on this appeal. So do commissioners have any bias, conflicts of interest, or ex parte contacts to disclose? Okay, I'm not seeing any. All right. Does anyone in the audience or does a member of the commission wish to challenge the impartiality of any of the planning commissioners? Keep in mind, this is not the time for testimony, but it is an opportunity to explain a concern about the impartiality of a commissioner who will participate in the decision on the appeals. If you have any such concern, please raise your hand using the hand icon or dial *9, and staff will let you into the meeting to explain your concern. Well, to the staff, I guess I'd ask, do we have anybody asking to speak?
I do not see any hands raised.
Okay. Okay, with that taken care of, I want to take a minute and explain who the Planning Commission is and what our role is here. We're unpaid volunteers. We're appointed by the Eugene City Council to 4-year terms on the commission. We all live and work in Eugene, like many of you. We directly advise the City Council on all matters related to land use, and we are also tasked with making certain land use decisions on behalf of the City Council. We're responsible for upholding the laws of our city and the state and the policies of our City Council. And of course, at the same time, we're also responsible to everyone that lives and works in Eugene. We're at-large members. That means we have to consider the needs of the community as a whole, as well as the needs of all groups and neighborhoods. We're also human beings, which means that each one of us has personal views that make us who we are. But as planning commissioners, we're committed to balancing all of our needs as a community and to making the best decisions that we can based on our policies and our laws for us and for future generations. That can be hard to do. And we know not everyone will agree with every decision we make. So as we proceed today, we want you to know up front, we're listening, we care about you, we care about the community, and we will listen carefully to your concerns and to your hopes. Even if we can't do what you want, please know that you will be heard, and we will strive to make the best decision possible. Some of the terms that we use in this process, this quasi-judicial process, are legalistic. I'll try to explain some of the requirements as best I can. I have a brief overview here. Since this is an appeal hearing, there are unique procedures that we are legally required to follow. The decision of the Planning Commission on this appeal is considered quasi-judicial, and we will use a quasi-judicial format for this public hearing. This means we have a certain order of speakers we need to follow. There are certain rules or criteria that our decision must be based on. Purpose of the hearing tonight is to receive relevant testimony on the appeal before us. I want to remind everyone that testimony must be directed toward the issues identified in the appeal statements and the applicable approval criteria from the Eugene Code and Section 200, subsection 8 of Division 23 of Chapter 660 of the Oregon Administrative Rules. No new evidence can be presented to the Planning Commission. Therefore, your testimony tonight should only relate to the facts and the information that were presented to the Historic Review Board. What this means is that your testimony should only address the material and the information that was already presented to the Historic Review Board, and whether or not you think the Historic Review Board made a mistake based on the applicable approval criteria from the code and the 8 factors listed in Section 200, subsection 8 of Division 23, Chapter 660 of the Oregon Administrative Rules. I also want to remind everyone that failure to raise an issue with sufficient specificity to allow the Planning Commission and other parties to respond will preclude future appeals on that issue. In other words, now is your opportunity to raise issues as clearly as you can so that the city and other parties can address them. Those wishing to speak during the public hearing will be asked to virtually raise your hand. I'm going to ask tonight that individuals other than the applicant and the appellants limit their testimony to 3 minutes. We want to allow everyone a chance to speak this evening. There are different ways to raise your hand depending on how you're participating in this format. If you're joining us on a computer, a tablet, or a smart device, you can raise your hand by clicking on the blue hand icon at the bottom of the screen or by opening the participant window. If you're joining by phone, you can dial *9, after which you should hear audio confirmation of your hand being raised. So if you wish to speak, and if you have not already raised your virtual hand, please do that now. The Planning Commission's decision will be the final city decision on this matter. If there are further appeals after our decision, they will go to the State Land Use Board of Appeals. So before we get started formally here, I want to thank everyone again for your patience, your flexibility, your good humor while we work through this virtual meeting format. And as always, please feel free to contact staff if there is testimony you were not able to provide or if you wish to get to us in a different manner. So we're going to start with a brief presentation here from staff. And at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Althea Sullivan, Senior Planner.
Thank you. And you introduced me, so I suppose I'll save introducing myself, but I will introduce my colleagues that are here this evening. Lauren Summers, Assistant City Attorney, Gabe Flock, Principal Planner, and then Alyssa Hansen, our Planning Director, are also here this evening. All right, are you all seeing my screen? Okay. So this is an appeal hearing for an application known as the Harry and Etta Chase House. The applicant's proposal is to remove 3 buildings that are associated with the Chase Historic Ensemble. And in the place of those buildings, they are proposing to provide 123 units of low-income housing in a 4-story building. So a little bit of context. On the top left side of your screen is a photo of the Harry and Etta Chase house that was taken recently. And then the photo on the right shows the house at the time it was nominated for historic status. It is contributing as it relates to the National Register listing for the properties as a historic ensemble. The other structures that the applicant is proposing to demolish are the garage apartment. So that's sort of attached and just to the side of the Harry and Etta Chase house. And then also the Francis Chase Brenneman and Jesse Brenneman house that is located just to the north of the Harry and Etta Chase house. It's noted that both of these are non-contributing in the context of the historic ensemble. So in the nomination that was put together, these were determined to not be contributing structures. And these are some graphics from the applicant's application. So you're seeing a rendering of their building there as it would face Garden Way. And then you're also seeing their site plan. So you see it has a parking area, landscaping, and then internal to the building, there's a courtyard area with a few different features there. And then kind of stepping back a little bit, this is a vicinity map of the area. So outlined in that boulder lining is the 2 properties. So to the south is the Harry and Etta Chase house, and a little bit further south of that, that was that apartment garage area that I mentioned. And then to the north is the other house. And then surrounding this area is a variety of different apartment buildings, and then also a few assisted care facilities. And then just to the north, you can see there's a waterway that runs there. So this application came in to the city of Eugene. Requests for historic demolition, historic alteration, and adjustment review applications are things that are typically reviewed by the planning director. And then if a historic demolition or historic alteration were to be appealed, that's something that would typically go to our historic review board for additional review. Around 2017, the Oregon administrative rules were changed. And that's the Oregon administrative rule that you're seeing there, now requires cities to hold a public hearing when a request is made to demolish a National Register historic structure. And so instead of going through the planning director first for a decision and then an appeal going onwards, the city needed to hold a public hearing. And so that hearing was held at our historic review board. That hearing was held on March 17th. And I will note that the record was held open following that hearing for an additional 21 days for more evidence and arguments to come into the record. With that hearing at the historic review board, the applicant could have just had the historic demolition reviewed under that Oregon administrative rule, but they specifically requested that all of their applications be reviewed as an entire packet. So the demolition under the Eugene Code, the historic alteration, and then one of the historic alteration approval criteria specifically requires that the city look at any standards for features shown within the request. And the applicant showed a detailed site plan, and there were some features on there that they requested adjustments to. And so that's why that request was lumped in with the historic alteration as well. And so the applicant requested that all of those be reviewed at the hearing, and the Historic Review Board approved the applicant's request with a few conditions of approval. The conditions of approval were primarily focused on the adjustment review request. So following the approval, the city received appeals of the Historic Review Board's approval. We received appeals from two different parties. One appeal from Stephen Baker and then another from the Harlow neighbors. And I suppose I should mention the appeals from Stephen Baker are actually two appeals. One was submitted specific to the adjustment review, and the other was submitted specific to the historic demolition. The Harlow neighbors appealed all of the applications that the Historic Review Board had approved. And then with appeals, staff always tries to identify what the appeal issues are. Sometimes we have appeals that are submitted where someone states exactly what their issues are. Other times people provide kind of more of a comprehensive review of the variety of their different issues they're raising, but we still try and break those into specific issues. And so as we saw the issues, there are 5 issues being raised in the appeals from Stephen Baker. The first is allegations of an incomplete record. And so that was really, and these are staff's namings of what we thought the appeals are. These were not the namings provided by Stephen Baker. With that allegations of an incomplete record, that was really focused on how record materials were handled and provided to various parties. The second item was the incorrect review process for adjustment review. And so that was, as we see it, making an argument that the Historic Review Board should not have reviewed the adjustment review application. Third was an allegation of the need for a land use code amendment to comply with the Oregon administrative rule. So instead of holding a public hearing, that the city needed to amend its land use code. And then fourth was incorrect application of factors from the Oregon administrative rule. So the Oregon administrative rule I've referenced provides 8 different factors for approval. Those are condition, historic integrity, age, historic significance, value to the community, economic consequences, design or construction rarity, and consideration and consistency with policies in the comprehensive plan. And so Baker's appeal there provided some arguments about why some of those factors had not been met. And then finally is the standard for review. And we understood that to be an assertion that this hearing at this point is not limited to the appeal issues, and that someone could bring additional evidence and issues. I will note that Eugene Code 9.7655 provides some language around how appeals are held. And the appeals are limited to the issues written out in the appeal statement, limited to the issues that were before that first decision maker. So in this case, that was the Historic Review Board, and then also limited to the record that was before the Historic Review Board. So someone couldn't bring in new evidence at this point. And then the appeal from the Harlow neighbors focused on, it did separate the issues out. We saw 3 issues there, which was historical district, property alteration. We understood this to be a request and notes that the applicant needed to provide some sort of artifacts or placemaking or kind of different features on the site. I will note that, and this is discussed further in the agenda item summary, but the applicant did propose to provide some placemaking features on the site. The second appeal issue was no Native people's history or archaeological conditions. In that, we understood that it was, the appeal is that the applicant should have consulted with tribal leaders. And then the third item was partnering with Eugene City Parks. And again, we understood that to be that the applicant should have partnered with city parks in relation to the area north of this property and the waterway or pedestrian areas there. A few procedural items, as I mentioned, that Eugene code section, this appeal is on the record, which means that additional things, we're really looking at arguments that are coming in about whether or not the Historic Review Board got it right based on how the appeal issues are raised and what those issues are and allegations that they got their decision incorrect. And then I will note that I have received a few different emails today, and I may be receiving additional emails right now. I will provide, and in those emails is some additional testimony for you all. I will provide that following this hearing as one packet instead of a variety of different emails. So you will get that if you are listening right now and you sent an email to me and you did not get a response from me saying that I received it, please go ahead and send that to me again. I will respond and let you know that I have it. And then I also received an email that made a request to keep the record open. And with that, I will just note that a decision needs to be reached by June 22nd of this year to meet both state law requirements and requirements of the Eugene Code. The Planning Commission is not obligated to keep the record open in this case because there was already a hearing that had an opportunity for that record to be held open. And due to the timeline for making a decision, staff would recommend that the Planning Commission not keep the record open, but after you all have heard from folks this evening, there will be an opportunity to discuss that further. And then this is just the order of procedures here with printed instructions on how to raise your hand if you didn't catch that. So please review those. And then for those speaking tonight who submitted an appeal, this is really your opportunity if you think that staff got it wrong with those issues or you are trying to raise something else in there that we missed, please raise that this evening. And with that, I will conclude my presentation.
Thank you. Thank you, Althea. Okay, so at this point, I'm going to open the public hearing. As a reminder, the testimony, we're asking that testimony be limited to 3 minutes from all parties other than the applicant and the appellants. For the applicant and the 2 appellants, I want to allow 15 minutes each. We'll have the applicant and then the 2 appellants will speak. And then we will hear testimony from the others that are here tonight who want to testify. As a reminder, also at the beginning of your testimony, please provide your name and your address. Let us know whether you're in favor, neutral, or opposed to the application. The applicant, once we're done with that, the applicant will be given a final opportunity to respond after the other testimony is provided. So I think at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Althea and I'll let her kind of take us through this.
Okay, I am working on bringing the applicant in now.
Okay.
And thanks for your patience. It always takes a few minutes for people to move over in Zoom. Jessica, is there anyone else for your team that you want me to move over?
Is John Tess here?
I will look. I do see John and just promoted John.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and start with the share screen and Darcy's going to kick things off while I'm getting this set up.
Good evening, commissioners and staff, and thank you for all of your dedicated time regarding the matter at hand. My name is Darcy Phillips. I'm representing Cornerstone Community Housing as the executive director, and we are in favor of the approval of the application for demolition. Cornerstone is committed to creating quality, affordable housing for people living on limited incomes, and we offer services that promote opportunities for personal growth and economic independence. Our plan is to develop 123 new housing units at 132 and 158 Garden Way. This combined site is ideal for creating much needed housing for hardworking families, seniors aging in place, folks who struggle with disabilities, and survivors that are fleeing domestic violence. Currently, the need for larger, affordable family housing in Eugene is tremendous, and our market research supports this. Within a 1 mile radius of this site, only 11% of units are 3 or 4 bedrooms, with 61% being 2 bedrooms. For this reason, we've made a conscious decision to design 48 3 and 4 bedroom family sized units, 44 1 bedroom units that are ideal for seniors, and to bring balance to this community, we've added 30 2 bedroom units. This intentional design focuses on a multi-generational strategy to accomplish our vision for this site, a community that connects neighbors of varying cultures and stages in life with the promise of a dignified future and opportunities that affirm well-being. Before I pass the mic on to our consultant, Jessica Engelman, to summarize the main points of our application and our thoughts on the appeal issues, I wanted to thank you again for your time this evening, and I ask that you uphold the Historic Review Board's approval of our application. Jessica?
Yes, thank you, Darcy. Hello, commissioners. Just a quick word about me and what I do. I'm a historic preservation consultant, and I've been doing work with historic buildings in Oregon for about 20 years now. And as I told the HRB, normally I don't get involved in demo cases because I'm in the business of typically saving buildings and repurposing them. But I do think that there are situations when the best community outcome does involve demolition and replacement of a historic structure. And indeed, this is one of those cases. So I can assure you that we did not choose to submit this demolition application blithely. I joined the team back in 2020, and considerable time was spent looking at how we might be able to retain the Chase house. Ultimately, we determined it wasn't feasible, as retaining the house would result in significantly higher construction costs. It would sacrifice a total number of housing units. There would be a loss of required parking spaces, and it would substantially reduce outdoor space for residents. We knew there was a high bar in this process, and we worked closely with staff to provide a complete and thorough application addressing all approval criteria and submitting reports from many highly qualified professionals. So with this presentation, I really want to focus on the 8 factors from the OAR, since many of the appeal issues come directly out of these factors. And for each of them, I'll briefly describe the evidence that we submitted and our findings from our analysis. Everything in this presentation is already in the record. Beginning here is age. The house, the Chase house, was built in 1914 and it's 108 years old. There's really not a whole lot more to say about its age other than that, although there are 2 other houses in this National Register grouping that are older than this one. Related to condition, we submitted into the record a 14-page condition assessment report prepared by Roll Brokaw Architects. This described the deferred maintenance on the house, unsafe conditions and code issues, as well as provided a scope of work that would be required to reuse the house on site as part of a high-density residential project. And we recognize that many homes of this vintage have similar condition and code issues, and that they can be physically rectified. We are not requesting demolition solely based on the home's condition. It's one factor to be considered. However, it will take substantial dollars to adaptively reuse this house in a code compliant manner, which we'll get to our economic arguments forthcoming. And I'll just provide you with a few other more up close photos of the condition of the exterior here, showing you all 4 elevations of the house. And here are 6 photos of the interior, showing you the dining room, living room, bathroom, stairs to the upstairs, the converted attic, and the kitchen. Also, for factor 2 condition, Roll Brokaw provided a landscape assessment report for the property, which included working with an arborist to assess the health of the trees. They found that many of the trees were unhealthy and cautioned that some would not survive the ground disturbance caused by construction. One of the mature walnut trees was identified as a good candidate for preservation, and this is reflected on our site plan. Factors 3 and 4 are integrity and significance. And for this, we brought on Heritage Consulting Group, specific to provide a thorough analysis on these topics, since they prepared over 400 National Register nominations across the country and have done more nominations in Oregon than any other consultant. So they provided an 11-page report and did additional research, including finding many historic photos that were also submitted into the record. Heritage's report asked the question, is this house actually significant? And while we're not contesting the building's National Register designation, in analyzing the 1999 nomination, Heritage found that the document does not make a compelling case that the house has a high level of significance. The ensemble is nominated for its association with the Chase family and their agricultural enterprise, yet Harry Chase, pictured here, who was the original owner of the house, had a professional life separate from the family business. This photo was when he worked as the Lane County clerk. There's no information that we could find that he, unlike his father and uncle, were important figures. They were the founders of the family business. Furthermore, the ensemble is also nominated for its architecture, stating that the homes here show a, quote, progression of styles, this house being representative of the bungalow style. However, the Chase house really does not feature the distinctive characteristics of the bungalow style, which typically have a straightforward roof form, a prominent front porch, an easily visualized front door that greets the street. Also, usually there are eave brackets, horizontal siding, shutterless windows, and window sashes that are of equal size. None of these here are present, making this a rather subpar example of a bungalow. This is a good place to make sure that it's clear that our project demolishes only 1 of 4 contributing homes in the grouping. Importantly, the older farmhouses associated with the Chase Garden founders will remain intact. Approval of this project does not spell the end of the historic designation, nor of the history of Chase Gardens in this area. In fact, our project will provide interpretive measures that are currently lacking, which I'll describe shortly. All right, on to historic integrity. Heritage's report also analyzes the home's integrity, which is the historic stuff that we can see and touch and feel. Alterations and intrusions made over time can significantly impact whether a building has historic integrity. While I don't want to go too far into the weeds here, Heritage evaluated the 7 aspects of integrity bulleted there on the slide: design, materials, workmanship, setting, location, feeling, association, and found that changes to the property after the historic era have indeed diminished the integrity. These are things like changes to the setting and feeling with a large rental unit right next to the house, the change in siding, new windows, the attic door within the gable, the rear dormer, the new porch floor and acoustical tile ceilings, the added shutters. All of those have changed the design, materials, and workmanship of the house. Factor 5 is design and construction rarity, also addressed in Heritage's report. And this is the slide that I provided in our presentation to the Historic Review Board. Bungalows were often bought as mail order house kits. They were very common in the early 20th century, all across the nation. To get a sense of how this plays out in Eugene, I looked at the State Historic Preservation Office's database. Sorting the data for Eugene, there are 1,468 buildings under the bungalow style, compared to 423 for Craftsman, 104 for Queen Anne, and so on. These are inventoried buildings, not buildings that are already listed in the National Register. but it gives you the sense of the high proportion of bungalows in Eugene. They are not a particularly rare house type. Factor 6 is value to the community. And there will certainly be differing opinions on this, but our view is that this home as a private residence has comparatively less value to the community than other more publicly accessible historic resources. As a private residence, the public cannot walk onto the property nor go inside the home. And the property also has no historic interpretive signage or any way for the public at large to understand the past uses of this area. So we address this factor in several ways. We submitted into the record a 2-page letter from Cornerstone describing many of the things that Darcy provided in her introduction, talking about the positive community impacts that will come from the proposed affordable housing project. We also submitted a mitigation plan describing the measures we are taking to create positive community impacts by sharing the area's history. So this includes a high quality historic interpretive sign like you would see in a state park, tree preservation and new fruit tree planting, historic documentation to the Lane County Historic Museum, and the exploration of Chase-related naming opportunities. We also have offered to sell the house for $1 to anyone who can move it and promise to contribute $20,000 towards this effort. We also prepared a 2-page inadvertent discovery plan to have procedures in place should there be any discovery of archaeological materials during construction, including following the proper process with the State Historic Preservation Office and the tribes. Factor 7 is economic consequences, of which there are many to consider here. This is my particular area of expertise as I've worked in the niche real estate development world of historic adaptive reuse for all of my career. And I taught the graduate seminar in historic preservation economics at U of O for many years. I provided a 5-page rehabilitation feasibility assessment looking at rehab only, rehab and low density housing, as well as retaining the house with high density housing. None of these were financially feasible, even with historic preservation financial incentives factored in. The bottom line is that the land here is worth $2 million, and Cornerstone is already proposing to build the smallest building possible that is financially feasible given that land value. Also for Factor 7, our contractor, Miley Construction, provided an economic impact statement detailing the construction jobs that will be created by this project, as well as the tax revenues. They estimate 250 full-time jobs, 200 part-time jobs, 3.3 million in taxes paid. And this doesn't include the jobs that will be created when the project is done and fully occupied. And lastly, we come to Factor 8, which required that the HRB take into account the consistency with and consideration of other policy objectives in the acknowledged comprehensive plan. For this factor, Farrington Community Planning and Development analyzed for us the applicable plan policies and provided a 6-page report. Overall, the affordable housing development is highly consistent with the majority of the plan policies. Cornerstone's proposed new building complies with the city's objectives for high density housing embodied in the site's Metro Plan and Willett-Kensey Area Plan designation. Most importantly, I will call your attention to the policy that's shown on this slide, which directly states that the city shall allow for the eventual development of these historic sites as high density residential. Indeed, the public policy decision was settled years ago that multifamily was the best outcome for this site. Finally, in fulfilling these policy objectives, we've also complied with density requirements and other city code standards. Where we have needed flexibility from literal application of any code standard, we have sought and received adjustment review approval. Our 3 land use applications were submitted currently for consistency with code requirements and full transparency about the project. To wrap up, we felt that staff did an excellent job with their initial staff report and that the HRB was thoughtful in their deliberations. With respect to these appeals, we've carefully reviewed the issues raised by the appellants and agree across the board with staff's analysis. Most of what was raised was not sufficiently specific in the appellant's allegations of error. while other issues were either irrelevant to the approval criteria or raised new issues that can't be considered at this point. Finally, I want to affirm that this project is ready to move forward. We have secured our financing, which consists of low-income housing tax credits, GAP grant funds, and affordable housing trust funds. This new building will have a significant impact on our community, meeting 30% of the Eugene Springfield Consolidated Plan's strategic goal to provide 410 additional affordable housing units between 2020 and 2025. We are excited to bring this project forward in a neighborhood of other high-density buildings while continuing to honor the Chase Garden legacy in ways that we have set forth in our application and I've described here. Thank you, commissioners, for your time and consideration, and I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you. I think what we want to do now is have the appellants give us a statement.
And I am working on moving over one of our appellants, Stephen Baker. You'll be moving over first.
Okay.
Can you unmute yourself, Stephen?
Before I start, I wanted to confirm that we are handling the three different land use applications separately, because I have a separate appeal for the demolition and a separate appeal for the adjustment review. The other appellant has filed an appeal for all three. So I want to confirm that we're discussing these separately, and then I'll make my statement for the first appeal issue, which is the demolition.
You can, if I'm understanding correctly, so this would be your opportunity to provide testimony on all three of those things. You can let the commission know which item you're speaking to specifically.
Well, normally when we appeal different land use applications, we deal with one land use application first, and then we go on to the others. We go in them order. So this would be unusual. I was on the planning commission for 10 years. And that was traditionally the way we would handle appeals. We wouldn't mix them all together. So I'm going to confirm that what the process is assumed to be.
That would
My
be
understanding, we've made all three applications were made at the same time. We're handling them together. We'll let Althea talk more about that. Or
I would use this opportunity to make any statements that you have about all of the applications. The applicant provided information about all of the applications now, and so you would provide your information about all of the applications, and then the other appellant would also have an opportunity to provide information about all of the applications.
And am I correct? And my time allotted is 15 minutes?
yeah, 15 minutes.
Okay. All right. Well, great. Then at least I know what the ground rules are. I know how to proceed. I just didn't know. So I'm going to start with the adjustment, the demolition, and then I'll spend some time at the end on the other issue, which is the adjustment review. And let me take a minute here and bring up my appeal statement here. Okay. Uh, Okay, I believe I'm ready to begin, and I assume I can share my screen. Is that correct? Is that correct?
You can share your screen.
Okay, it's going to be a challenge for me because all right, let me just, I can't really see the other people or you. Okay, so can people see my screen now? And I'll try to make this maximum. I guess that's what I can do. Okay. Can you?
We cannot see your screen. If you're looking at Zoom, there should be a share screen at the bottom. It's green. It has an arrow that points up. If you click that, you should then be able to select your screen to share.
Yeah, what happened is Zoom got let's see. Okay. Can you see that now?
I cannot see what you're sharing.
Okay.
But maybe if you have slides, maybe try to advance a slide.
Yeah, actually what it is, it's just not letting me share the screen properly. Let me see if I can get this to, every time I change this, it shrinks the Zoom window. So Zoom share. Can you see it now?
I'm not really getting anything to see it. You've got a block of space there. Now you've got something.
Okay. So let me do that. And now you can see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. Things that begin to say oral testimony on appeal?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So I'm going to just scroll through this and cover these issues. So I'll start my timer now so I'll know when to quit. First of all, I want to state that I want to request that the record be left open. Eugene Code requires only 10 days of notification on this appeal, and that's when the notification is mailed to the applicant, the appellant, and those within 300 feet of the property. Those on the Planning Commission mailing list receive an email of 6 to 7 days in advance. So there's about a week. If you're lucky, there's a week that people get notified on the Planning Commission mail database. Other interested parties must be notified by others. And there's not enough time to review the record and prepare testimony. And probably maybe a dozen individuals are on the Historic Review Board email notification list. So very few members of the Eugene community were notified of the HRB public hearing. And I'll go to the next screen. Okay. Now I'm going to try to switch to a different screen. Get back to Zoom and switch. Let's see here. see a black window now?
I can.
Okay, good. All right. So
I'm not getting audio if this video has audio.
what? What? What, Althea?
I was letting you know that I'm not getting audio if this video has audio, if you can turn it up.
Oh, okay. I didn't know it was going. Okay. I'll start it again and turn it up all the way. I'm getting audio now.
I'm still not getting audio. I don't know if anyone else is.
I'm not getting video either, Steve.
This is one of the videos that's in the record, correct?
Yeah, I think we have this video.
Oh. I will look for Steve in the participants.
Althea, it looks to me like he may have left the meeting. Maybe we can move to the second appellant, and if he comes back. Oh, wait, I see he just popped back onto attendees.
Yes, I am working on moving him back over right now. Stephen, you should be able to talk again if you want to unmute yourself. You're back in the meeting.
Somehow I got kicked out of the meeting. All right, well, I'll skip the video. I would suggest that the planning commissioners make certain to look at the first 2 minutes and the last 2 minutes of that video that's in the record. It was narrated by Whitey Luke, who uses this area often, takes his students along with other landscape architecture professors, take students over here because of the diversity of landscaping materials here. So I will, let's see, I will just share my screen again and oops, it seemed to work. Did that work?
I am seeing a blank screen. I don't know if anyone else sees anything else.
How about now?
I can see something now.
Okay, I just stopped it. Sorry. Because I didn't think you could see it, I stopped it and I'll share it again, try to get my.
I'm just going to suggest that he probably has a very weak Wi-Fi signal, and so it's just taking things a long time to load.
Microsoft for 20 years. I don't use Wi-Fi. I have dedicated Wi-Fi to my house.
Okay, so things are just taking a little while to load, so just so we're all aware of that.
Okay. All right, well, I'll just skip the video and we'll just go to this. I wanted to show from Google Earth, this is the two properties that are being proposed for demolition. And you can see how heavily landscaped and treed these are. These are areas that have trees going back to 100 years. I want to make the point that this was all planted by the Chase family. This entire area was prairie before when they moved to this site in the 1880s. And every piece of landscaping material on these 5 properties was planted by them. So you can see these are the 2 properties that are slated for demolition. These are 2 to the south, and this is the one to the north. And I'll show in the next screen. This is the property that the neighborhood and I have been discussing, that with parks about. This is a larger piece of property, and part of this could be traded for the property there. And I noted in my testimony that there were better sites for this development very close at hand. This is a good example. There are no tenements. There's no natural. There's no major vegetation. There are no National Register properties that have to be destroyed. And the same a project could be built here, and it would be a win-win for the community. This is the layout of the 5 properties. These 2 are the 2 properties that are proposed for demolition. The entire reason, the justification for this National Register was the grouping of the 5 buildings. None of the houses are unique. In fact, only one of them is even on the list of historic structures for Eugene. All of these houses are, they're 4 of the houses are from different architectural periods, built at different times, different styles, and each one had its own associated planting and landscaping that they did that was associated with the time when it was built. The 2 end structures were built by the 2 original brothers. The others were built by other family members of the generations who followed. And of course, this was all part of this larger Chase Gardens project site that a lot of that is all now in high density, medium to high density housing and other uses. And I'll also point out, as long as we're discussing it, that keep referring to we don't seem to refer to the Chase Gardens Nodal Development Plan that was adopted 10 years after the original refinement plan for this whole much larger area. And in that plan, it specifically notes that these historic properties could be redeveloped infill housing. And there's an argument in this by the staff that says, well, that doesn't make sense. Well, of course it doesn't make sense because it doesn't make sense to apply that to the entire Chase Gardens sub area. This was only applied to the historic structures, and it's documented in my testimony in the record. And again, an ensemble, it's an ensemble of 5 buildings, 5 properties and 4 buildings. And if you could go back here so you can see that the National Register property actually dots around this one house. It was considered not historic, but the rest of the lot and the landscaping was. And the concern is you take out, if you demolish these, all of the historical consultants who have written in to discuss this, aside from the applicant, say that what the effect will be is the entire property will be delisted by the State Office of Historic Preservation, because you no longer have the grouping. Right now, you can walk down the street and you see 4 different architectural styles within a block. Where in Oregon do you find that? Nowhere do you find that. In fact, nowhere in the Northwest do you find that. Again, just the text that comes directly from the National Register application, construction from 1889 to 1945, surrounding landscapes minimize the growth of the Chance family. It retains its historical integrity in terms of location, feeling, and historic association. Now, OIR 660-2023-200, it should be pointed out that Eugene code is not in compliance because it does not require a public hearing for a historic demolition. In the Eugene code, the planning director can make that determination. So OIR overrules that and requires specific criteria be met, factors. Now, the normal interpretation of this would be that there would be a clear evaluation to be made of each of the 8 factors, and the weighting of these factors is not specified in the OIR, but it assumes it would be left to the public hearing body to determine the weight and factor, importance of any factor. And this could be varied based on the situation being considered. So, I mean, this is all from my test, from my field statement. The example of age. Age is not a disputable factor. A building is, this building is 108 years old. If it's 50 years old, you might consider it to be a shortcoming, but in this case, not. The final order didn't properly evaluate each factor separately. All 8 factors justifications keep referring to and other factors, and no specification what these other factors were for each of these 8 factors. No specification of the weighting factor. Details about each factor are discussed in my appellant statement. The impact of testimony from Christine Curran, Deputy Director, was omitted from discussion in the HRB final order. This is the Deputy Director of SHPO. Additional testimony from well-respected historic preservation consultants also disagreed with the determination. Now I'll switch over to the alteration. The Eugene Historic Review Board is a certified local government by state standards. It has a signed agreement with the Oregon State Historic Preservation Office. These are copies of the signed agreement from the CLG agreement between the state of Oregon and the city of Eugene, which was actually signed by Brian Obey in 1988. And these are the 4 basic responsibilities that the state has delegated to the Historic Review Board. Again, the Historic Review Board is delegated these responsibilities by the state in a state agreement. You can note here that it says no other additional responsibilities have been delegated. The Historic Review Board was not delegated any other responsibilities. Those were the four stated issues that it could deal with. This is an agreement with the state. And early on, when the staff was discussing the concern that it's not completely dependent on the record, state agreements have the same power as law. I mean, you can't break, even just because I didn't introduce some ORS doesn't mean it can't be introduced in the record of a hearing at any point in time. That is considered a state consideration. Also, in the appeal statement from the staff, they make reference to the same thing in the EC code. The Historic Review Board is given certain specific responsibilities. And then they go on to apply that, well, that you can add whatever other responsibilities you want to that. Well, that's not the case. The Historic Review Board was created by a specific city ordinance that created the Historic Review Board to review those specific historic issues. It didn't give them the power to review adjustment reviews, whether they were combined with historic issues or not. It only gave them the power to review historic issues. And if you look in the EC code, it says that an adjustment review, in this case, an adjustment review would certainly first have been reviewed by the planning director, and then, depending on what the planning director decided, it could be appealed, and it would be appealed to the planning commission. So this issue was really pretty straightforward. The Historic Review Board exceeded its legislative authority, both by state contract and also by what was specified in the EC code itself. So this is a straightforward one. This is not arguing about whether a building was historic or not. This is just straight procedural legal law. And so on. That's what I will leave it at in this case. And I'll close my remarks at that point. This has definitely been a challenge. To do this over Zoom, it would have been a lot easier if I gave you a flash drive and you threw it up on the screen like we did for many, many years. So I appreciate everyone's patience. Look forward to any questions that the Planning Commission or would like to request answers to. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. And we've got some time coming up here for questions from commissioners. I'll let Althea bring the other appellant over.
I am working on that.
Now, I assume that you were able to see my screen because I didn't realize when I got kicked off, my video went out, but you were able to see my screen?
I think a part of the time I was able to see the screen that you had text on.
Okay, that's
and a few of the pictures in the vicinity map.
Okay, that's good. That's all I was trying to make.
All right.
Thank you. I will mute.
Thank you.
Paul, you are in the meeting and should be able to unmute yourself and talk now.
Good evening, Planning Commission. My name is Paul Vonderbaden, and I am the chair of the Harlow Neighborhood Association over here in Harlow. And the prospective project is bounded by our neighborhood association. So this is my first time actually giving testimony in front of the EPC. So bear with me if I need some guidance. Just let me know what I need to do, okay? And I'm going to try to be as short as possible. I'm not going to submit any new testimony other than reiterate what the basis of our appeal, is. So Having said that, essentially, I'm going to read from the written appeal that we filed, and I know that Stephen and I have been discussing things, and I would just let you know that there are other hearings going on in zoning hearings and things like that do pertain to this project. So just if I don't bring something up, it doesn't mean that we're not concerned. It's just I'd like to stick to the appeal as it has been presented to the commission. So let me get started right off by saying we appealed all three of the I guess the hearing items, and let's start right off by saying that our appeal started with discussing the historic alteration, and essentially, you know, we looked at all 8 of the criteria, the factors, and we had a problem with the applicant just saying, hey, we're going to demolish down to bare ground, and therefore there's nothing left, and therefore there's no more historical nuance or history or whatever you want to call it, recording available for, you know, like for the alterations or for the demolition. We disagree with that. We just see that as not a very good basis for saying that it doesn't apply. We say it does apply in all cases, in all 3 of these cases, and here's why. Essentially, we couldn't understand why the applicant's project planning or presentation did not talk about any, well, first we didn't understand what the grove meant, where that came from, Chase or any other element of history, recorded history. And we think that it's really important to preserve history, that words are important, and that the applicant, Cornerstone, can do a better job in making their improvement at this center of the historical ensemble as being amplifying the historical value of the property, of the whole 5 building ensemble, or the historical district as we like to call it over here. So that's the main thing. And we're looking for more information, if you will. And I wanted to ask that the record be held open for a little longer, more testimony from any either the applicant, the HRB staff, or anybody else. That I'm not bringing any more testimony, but we're asking that more testimony be brought before a final decision is or a revised final decision is made, or the EPC you folks rule on this. Okay. And again, I just want to make sure that you understand the basis for the neighbor's appeal is not to criticize or fight. This is a very valuable project for our neighborhood. And it's important to almost all of our stakeholders, and we have respect for what Cornerstone can do and for what the city can do. But we are stakeholders, and we want to make sure that we can have our concerns that I'm going to talk about addressed in any way we can. Okay, and we'd like to get it done as soon as possible. So I'm going to start again and say that we'd like the record to be held open, and we're asking for input from other parties, not from ourselves, for that to happen. So the Planning Commission should also, you know, going back to the factors, should consider the the request at hand with some conditions. Okay, we asked for more conditions to be added on, and that is to explain where does the grove come from, and what more could be added to preserve the legacy of the Chase family, and also add as an anchor or a centerpiece for the historic district. And we already have historically a 2001 development plan called the Chase Gardens Nodal Development Plan. And I'm hearing from a lot of people, and it was a surprise to me, even in some of our hearings, that this plan perhaps is a failed plan or is something that's passé, and that requires work or adjustment or replacement and superseding by a different plan, okay, or a new plan. And I want to emphasize that if that's what's really going on, Harlow Neighbors wants to know about it and wants to be part of the new planning or the redevelopment or whatever it needs to be called. But we think that the Historical Review Board should at least be part of that panel discussion or whatever it might be, okay? And if it's not, then we need to go back to the Chase Gardens Nodal Development, what's it called again? Nodal Development Plan, and let's figure it out and then move forward. Okay, and this couldn't take too much, and if not, maybe it just needs to have a little bit of dietary supplement added to it or something, which would guide somebody like Cornerstone in the future. And I'm talking about the near future, the next 2 or 3 or 4 years, for any other projects coming along in that area, especially like Stephen alluded to, the parks and whatever community centers or whatever you might have in mind down there, especially with the community development folks. So having said that, words matter to us, and we think that the words should be added into the whole project under historic alteration. And we'd like that to come from the HRB, but if it's not somewhere else, it's fine too. That goes for interpretive items. One sign, a little sign, 3x5 sign isn't going to cut it, at least from our perspective with respect to being a Cornerstone, anchor project, in the historical ensemble. And the value of the historical district, I don't know if you can estimate that, but we think that it's more valuable to preserve it in words and recordings and other tangible means than just to demolish it. Okay. Moving on to historical demolition. There was no list of artifacts presented other than the actual inventory of the house itself. And it seems that if demolition is going to happen, it's just not the improvement itself. It's also the infrastructure, it's the soil, it's the vegetation, it's the trees, it's the whole thing. And not much condition is placed on the developer to do that, and we think that that's necessary. Let's see, that goes for taking inventory of not just what's on the buildings or in the buildings or under the buildings, but also even the soil itself. If we're talking about land swaps and things like that in the future, soil is a valuable commodity, and so is water. The other thing is, it's unclear to me whether we're coming from a preservation or a cover-up perspective. We all know that agricultural has a lot of hazardous substances, and they need to be dealt with appropriately. It's very unclear as to whether historical preservation here is good or bad. Okay, and I think we need some more information, at least here in Harlow, about what's going on out there. And if somebody hasn't done a a review of and soil sampling on the properties that are for sale currently, as well as the rest of the properties around there that was the original Chase Gardens. That needs to get done for everybody's sake. Okay, I don't want to really dwell on that subject at all, but having worked at a nuclear reservation for 20 years, I'm pretty sensitive to it as a individual Harlow neighbor. Okay, moving on, the actual inventory of, I refer to this in item 1B, little c, or it's halfway through. There's not an adequate inventory. I know the arborist was hired, and he took a litany of trees and things like that. But that's kind of 20th century stuff that our grandfathers did. We're in the age of DNA, and the fact is that if we want to preserve historical information, if you will, at least do the diligence, have some diligence, and provide what you are demolishing. If not to clone or to replant or to restart Chase Gardens in Springfield or something like that. At least have it for the record. This is what it was, and this is what we lost. Okay, end of story. So I think there's value in that, and that value should accrue to that property. Okay, and it could be also accrue to whatever happens to the property in 5 years or 50 years. This project will not stand forever. It'll probably stand for 60 years or until somebody demolishes that one too. Moving on to the historic alterations, item 1C, setting of the new project. It's again, it's not so much. It's not so much that it should be blocked. The historic alteration should be blocked or denied or anything like that. It's just that what's being approved, okay, and the fact that it's could be demolished to bare ground doesn't matters, because if the whole property, both parcels are grubbed down to nothing, what does that do to the whole district? And what I'm saying is we need to be constructive as a city and as neighbors and as a developer. We need to be constructive to preserve or to even edify the historical district. And Cornerstone, quite respectably, from our perspective, does a good job, but it does not do a great job with how its development is going to historically be the anchor or the centerpiece of the historical building. We just want to make that clear, and we think the Historical Review Board or the Planning Commission can set some goals and limitations with respect to what's going on the west side of South Garden Way. We think that it's very possible that we could come out of this not just with an affordable 123 new affordable units that's kind of the centerpiece of the whole area there, but it could be something that would fit dramatically with future community centers or commercial activities going on across the street, or even parkades. But essentially, we need less fill and more lead with respect to the development out here. And we can talk about this, in a design review or anything like that. We've reached out to Cornerstone, and we're standing by to try to be as helpful as possible. And I just want to keep everybody understanding that we want this project to succeed, and we don't want to lose anything that we already have. And that means careful demolition and careful alteration in line with with the plan that we already have that's been in place for 20 years, okay, or 21 years. So that's pretty much the first item. The second item is we talk about no native peoples history or archaeological conditions, going back to the archaeological condition. I guess you can call that under the historical alteration item, or hearing item. There's just a lack of explanation here, and we would look for more effort, if not from Cornerstone, from somebody else, to complete the history out there, with the idea that, hey, okay, we're knocking down the Chase house, but there's more than 100 years of history here. There's 1,000,000 years of history, but let's just focus on 1,000 years, maybe. Okay, who's talked to the sovereign nations? Has anybody talked to Grand Ron or to the other guys, the Siletz people? We just don't see it. So I guess it's our job to ask questions. It's your job to bring us some answers, and we'll see if that works for everybody. But certainly there's some history there, and certainly there's something underneath the top layer of grass. The question is, what are we going to do about it? Okay, and how are we going to do it? And that should be part of historical alteration. Now, if we need to put things off until that information is gained, okay, let's do that. But I mean, it sounds like the funding's already been arrived at. We do need to move ahead with the project. We understand that, but we want a great project. We don't want just another high rise in that neighborhood, especially. So we think that some Native American consulting needs to occur if it hasn't already occurred, and we think that there should be some conditions, again going back to the soil and the trees and everything that's a heritage there. There should be some conditions on what the Cornerstone contractors can or cannot do. Okay, and that could be solved any number of ways. Finally, item 3 under our appeal. This probably goes back to the actual ARB item. Partnering with Eugene City Parks. That's not so much as a partner. That's something we've always got in mind out there, because we want to do something with Chase Gardens Park. It's been Chase Commons Park, excuse me. It's been there for a long time, and it's been laying fallow, and there's been a lot of discussion about what to do that. I just got out of a meeting about the safe sleep spot plans for that area are being resurrected. But the issue is, in the old Chase Gardens nodal development plan, there is very clearly a bikeway or a walkway running north from the Kinsrow walkway there, from Kinsrow to Garden. There's a very clear indicator that there is a bike path, and that bike path goes directly over the floodway onto what is now called Chase Commons Park, which is city ground. We're talking about a transition from private ground on one side of the floodway to city ground on the other. And in the review of the ARB portion, we didn't see any reference to that at all. And it would seem like that would have some impact on parking, the footprint of the 123 units and everything else. And we just bring that up, but I think there needs to be a little bit more discussion with the with the city, not just community development folks, but city parks and whoever else is got a horse in the race there to get things done. essentially there's got to be some surveying. It looks like there has to be some partition of maybe part of the current Cornerstone project to city land, or maybe some easement or something like that. And we just think that something that got overlooked. And this is, since we're grouping 3 reviews into one, let's expand it just a little bit more, please. Okay. And I think that's all. I don't have any thing to upload or to share with you. You can read my well, I wrote it, but the Harlow Neighbors appeal, and basically it just asks, can you talk to us? Can you give us a little more help? Can you just answer our questions? And if you can't, if there's something wrong, there's something that can be made better, let's hold off, or let's make it conditional to further design review or zoning review. Thank you very much. Appreciate your time.
Thank you, Paul. Althea, do we have others who want to testify?
I see a hand raised for Keith. Keith, I'm working on moving you over so that you can speak.
So we have one hand?
We have one hand right now, and I suppose that's a good reminder for anyone that wants to speak. You should raise your hand if you have not already done so.
Yeah. If you do want to speak, please raise your hand. And at this point, the testimony we're limiting to 3 minutes each.
I'm not seeing. Oh, there's Keith. Keith, you should be able to unmute yourself and speak now.
Thank you. I would like to just quickly say what a wonderful opportunity here to see an historical property being changed to a nice project that has a good future as for families and lower income or whatever have it. You have one piece of property in Harlow that is undeveloped. The rest of it is done. The town is done of Harlow. What I see is the college off to the side here, Martin Luther King Expressway or Road is the way out of this landlocked neighborhood. It is the only way out, except if you take Garden Way all the way to Harlow. There is no entries from Garden Way to 105, and it goes under 105, but there is no way of getting your traffic to move on 105. You were pretty much landlocked to Martin Luther King Boulevard and Central Boulevard. Is that correct? Can you hear me? Okay.
We can hear you.
All right. To finish up real quick, the idea of what you're working on here is fine. My name is Keith Higgins. I am from Downtown Neighborhood Association. I'm curious. I stepped in here, and that's about what I wanted to say. It looks like for your firemen to get to these houses, if there's an emergency fire, conflagration, or some problem where you need to get back in here real quick, you're going to have to come down Martin Luther King from Coburg Road, and there's a lot of traffic on Coburg. it's, you, at least you have a road here. You can get to Centennial Boulevard to Springfield. So you can get across you're not trapped. But to me, I'm looking at this map. This is the last of the Mohicans. This is the last of the properties. This is the last of the properties of Harlow that you're dealing with here. This is the end of the Wild West. You've reached I-5. At one point, when I-5 came through here, it was all prairie, open land. This is a historical piece of property that has they used it up really good. You got your money's worth out of it. They could bulldoze the whole thing. It's got some nice tree in the back there, as they were talking about. You got no parks back in this corner. You got no parks all over Harlow. It's just a community of people who built their houses, and that's all they were looking for. There's no place to walk around. You'll have to go all the way to Alton Baker Park to get next to the river, to get some trees, get some fresh air.
Thank you, Keith.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Yeah, I think we're gonna move on.
Done.
I see one other hand. Thank you very much. I see one other hand, Althea.
Thank you. And Keith, before I move you back over to a participant, can you please give me an address?
Yes, I am at 305 Pearl Street, Eugene, Oregon.
Thank you.
Do you want a phone number?
Address works for us. We'll send a notice by mail.
Number 1708. Yopo is a big building. There's a lot of people in there. And the same, that goes from.
And Jonathan, I am working on moving you over at this time. You should be able to unmute yourself shortly. And if you could start by giving us your address as well.
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you.
Can you hear?
We can hear you.
Yeah, thank you. I'm on my phone instead of my computer because I wasn't able to get in on my computer this time, and I usually have no problem. So that maybe you want to check on that. 735 East 14th Avenue, apartment 23 is my address. I'm John Pincus. I've attended a lot of hearings related to historic preservation, a lot of historic review board meetings. And I was really kind of surprised by the process. I read Steve Baker's appeal, and I thoroughly concur with the points that he made, particularly about procedure. I was really surprised when I attended the meeting of the Historic Review Board that in which the vote was taken to approve the demolition, that no explanation of how the decision was made relative to the 8 values that should be addressed was provided. In fact, no explanation at all was provided. It was very unusual and eerie in my experience. I have read the application for the demolition permit. And as I said, I concur with Steve Baker's conclusions. This is an ensemble, and there's a reason we designate districts, groupings, and ensembles, because they tell a story through time and allow the citizens to touch those various eras in physical reality. So I think the State Commission understood that when they made the approval of the designation of the property. I was kind of surprised that a lot seems to rest on the consultant's evaluation, but the consultant isn't really who makes these determinations. The state committee makes these determinations with the advice of their staff, and they determined that this grouping or this ensemble merited National Register listing. And I think that is the authority on the significance of the grouping and the parts of the grouping. And that's what should be paid attention to. I also have pretty good knowledge of the property, and I think there's a lot of historic value in the remaining vegetation there, both in terms of trees and shrubbery. And the notion that that's all going to be cleared to bare ground without any consideration of that is that's a choice, but it doesn't mean that it's an appropriate choice in the context of a historic property. I thought the neighbor's testimony was compelling in terms of the relationship to the neighborhood also. I would really encourage you to read in detail Mr. Baker's appeal over again if you have not had a chance to review it a couple of times, because there's a lot in there, and there seems to be quite a bit missing in the process that has brought us to this hearing. I believe, as a designer, I've reviewed the plans of the applicant, and I believe firmly that every single objective of this project could be met with the retention of the house that's being applied for demolition. And I'd encourage you to create some kind of circumstance out of this hearing in which the applicant is required to go back and take a second look. I understand you're under a time frame, but I think that National Register properties are not a matter of convenience. That's my testimony. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Thank you, Jonathan. So do we have any other hands up, Althea? I don't see any.
I don't see any either. And I haven't seen anyone raise or lower their hand either.
Okay. So I think now we'll take some time now for some staff comments pertaining to what we've heard, and then want to open it up and see what kind of questions we might have from commissioners. So Althea.
I'm happy to do that. I did write down a few things that I think are maybe worth mentioning, and we can always go into this in detail more. Some of the testimony that I heard tonight, I didn't necessarily hear how it related to specific appeal issues, and I think there were a few items that were raised that may have been outside of the scope of the record. We will help sort some of those items. I did hear something about the Chase nodal plan, and I just wanted to mention that that plan was a precursor to a special area zone that is adopted in our code. And so it was a plan that eventually ended with codified code standards. That was something that we did discuss with the Historic Review Board as well. I also heard some notes about kind of the short timeline for review. And I will just mention that we did follow the Eugene code timelines for different notices. I understand that they do feel short to people at times, but we did send all of the required notices. And then I'll just make an offer for those listening. If you have questions about the process, my phone number is available, my email is available. I'm more than happy to have a conversation about any questions that you may have as well. I think those were the items that I had comments on, and I'm happy to answer any questions from commissioners. I also know the applicant has an opportunity for a final rebuttal, so I may defer some of those questions to them if it seems more appropriate to me to let them answer that.
Thanks. I think I'd like to take a bit of time here and see if any of the commissioners have questions on any of the testimony or any. We'll have some opportunity also here in a minute for commissioners to direct any questions they have to staff as we go forward ahead of deliberation. So with that, I'm okay. I've got Commissioner Fragola.
Thank you. So my apologies if this is not necessarily a question now or a request for information at our next opportunity to discuss this. I don't know which one it is. I'm wondering what, and I'd like more information. I guess maybe it is an information request, but an inadvertent discovery plan was filed. And I believe that Jessica Ingerman mentioned that, and I'm just curious, like how that works, and haven't had the opportunity to learn about that.
Okay, thank you. Let's see. I don't see any other hands up. Althea, do we want to address that at this point, the inadvertent discovery plan?
Happy to provide a little bit of information about that. And I will note that the Historic Review Board did provide a condition of approval related to that plan and requiring that it be with the plans for the application. And so that plan is in place if something were to be found during construction activities. There's a process outlined in that plan for contacting the State Historic Preservation Office and kind of appropriately dealing with whatever it is that may be found on the site.
Okay.
And that includes contacting sovereign tribes?
I don't know that that text was in this specific plan. That's something I can return with an answer about, or if the applicant knows if that text was included, they can provide that too.
Okay, so we'll note that to bring back some additional information on that. Is there anyone else who has particular questions about testimony or?
Commissioner Isaacson has both
thank you.
Types of hands raised.
Commissioner Isaacson.
I just wanted to dovetail off of Commissioner Freckler real quick. Would somebody be on site who would be knowledgeable if they had discovered something? I mean, for example, if I'm on site doing the construction, I wouldn't know necessarily that something had been discovered as opposed to someone who's qualified and trained to do so. Maybe you can add that to the questions being answered.
I am happy to look into that, and I'll just provide kind of a general comment that we do have requirements for building permits that require licensed contractors be on site. And so I'll look into a little bit more for you on that question about who that person is. But there are, I guess when someone's building a project, they're expected to follow a lot of different steps with that project. And so the inadvertent discovery plan and the applicant's offer for that is something that I would take as a genuine offer from them, and something that they have a plan in place to make sure is executed carefully and correctly. And I'll let them provide some additional comments if they want to, and we can look at the plan too. Okay.
I think in any event, we'll be bringing something back on inadvertent discovery when we have material brought back when we get started again next week. I'm not seeing any other commissioners' hands up. Oh, I'm Commissioner Fragola.
Sorry, I have one more question, and maybe it's a quick response, but if it's not, I would like information brought back on it. So I heard one of the speakers say that the 8 factors that we're looking at, the OAR does not indicate how they should be weighted, but that the decision-making body may choose to weight them. And if that is accurate, I would like some additional guidance or discussion of that at our next meeting?
I think that's a great item to discuss ahead of deliberations for next meeting.
I do too. So we'll have additional information on that. Commissioner Ramey.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair Beeson. So I'm not tracking our agenda here. I thought we were holding these questions until after the applicant had responded. We were directing questions primarily at testimony. I do have questions for staff, but should I, and I was holding those, and should I continue to hold them, or?
If you will, yeah, I wasn't as clear as I could have been. We were, and we're going to give the applicant another couple of minutes for a rebuttal, and then we'll close the hearing. We're going to take some time and see if there are specific questions from commissioners for items to be brought back for deliberation. So I'll get to you. Okay, I'm not seeing any other hands at the moment. I don't want to miss those. So I think where we are right now, what I'd like to do is recognize the applicant to give us some final comments, final rebuttal, if any. I'd like to allow about 10 minutes for this, or less if you can, but about 10 minutes. Thanks.
Jessica, can you let me know if you would like anyone else from your team brought over?
Yeah, if you would let Darcy and John in as well. And I'll go ahead and start talking while they're coming on here. I made a list as I was listening to the appellants here, and I'm just going to hit a few of these items. Stephen Baker had stated that everything on the site vegetation-wise was planted by the Chase family. And I would like to direct the commission to several items in the record that dispute that, both the heritage report, the historic photos and aerials that are in the record, as well as our final applicant response memo that's dated April 6th. I spent about 3.5 pages in that particular response memo dealing specifically with landscape related items that were brought up with the opponents. And you will see, looking at the aerials and photos, that everything was not planted by the Chase family, because that site has changed significantly in terms of landscape matter since the historic period of significance ended in the 1940s. The issue of trading with the park and all of that, that's a new issue that's not in the record, so we're not even going to go there. Comments related to infill housing. As I mentioned, we did look at this in my economic feasibility analysis, and infill housing was not something that was financially feasible, so I can direct you to that in the record. Mr. Baker brought up the concern about the other historic properties being delisted. We tackled that in our memo on March 24th and included the fact that we had a discussion with SHPO about that very concern. So I have stuff on the record related to that. The argument that it's unique to have 4 architectural styles on one block, that's a new topic that wasn't brought up before, so we're going to skip that one. I believe I heard Mr. Baker say that Christine Curran, the deputy SHPO's testimony had been omitted. If I heard that correctly, I just wanted to make sure that it's clear that she corrected an incorrect statement in her first letter and put a revised letter into the record, and both of those letters are on the record. The CLG issue is a new topic, not brought up before, so we're going to skip over that one. The discussion around, I'm not totally certain I understand the issue around Paul's concern about using the terminology bare ground, or that our approval criteria responses related to the historic alteration are predicated on understanding that the demolition allows the site to be to have the building removed. The reason why we use that terminology is because the alteration request was bundled with the demolition, and the responses to those approval criteria, it doesn't really make sense to respond to them accurately if it's not predicated on the fact that the demolition has been granted and the property is essentially a clean slate. So that's the best I can answer on that one. The naming of the project was not raised before and not part of the approval criteria. Again, hazardous waste not raised before, but I'll call your attention to a March 24th letter where we state that if the house isn't moved, that it will be deconstructed. And there's a lot of regulation in the waste disposal and deconstruction.
You are muted, Jessica, if you unmute yourself.
Sorry, hit a button there. Moving on to, let's see, the inventory of historical information, taking DNA and inventory of what's being demolished. I guess the thing I can point to in the record is that in our mitigation plan, we do state that we will be documenting the site and providing that documentation to Lane County Historical Museum. And again, the Native peoples also wasn't really raised before, so I'm not going to speak on that one. But that sort of folds into the questions that you had about the inadvertent discovery plan, and you'll be able to go back and look at that document. But I can clarify that we do have the Commission on Indian Services liaison there with his phone number in that document, and he's the first person to call to find out which tribes want to consult based on what's found on site. And this document also includes lists of, so it says 6, 7, 8, 9, about 9 different categories of Native American artifacts and a similar amount for Euro-American artifacts. So the document does give an idea of the types of things, if they were found, that work should stop and phone calls should be made at that point. So those were the things that I had on my list. Darcy, was there anything that I missed that you wanted to address?
I think you covered it.
All right.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much. See where we are here. So I think at this point, what I would like to do, and I've heard the testimony. I'm inclined to want to, well, we want to close the public hearing. I'm inclined to closing the record also, unless I hear objection from some of the commissioners. I think there have been 2 public hearings on this. We have quite a lot of information. We had the full record sent to us more than a week ago, and we have all that. We have all the material from tonight. So we do have a short time frame on this, given the law. And Althea, do you want to talk about that at all? Or
I suppose I'll just reiterate the fact that both the Eugene Code and state law provide a timeline for the review of a land use application. And so it is really important for the Planning Commission to make a decision on the application within that timeline.
Thanks. So again, I guess I'll see if anyone's got any comment, but I'm closing the public hearing. And again, I would like to also close the record. So do I have any, Commissioner Fragala?
Do we need a motion to close the record, Lauren?
Great question, Commissioner Fragala. It could be done by motion, or I think that in this case, because you would need a motion to keep the record open. I think the chair could close the record on his own. But if there's more discussion that Planning Commission wants to have before that decision is made, now would be the time.
Okay, great. Thanks for that clarification.
Is there any objection from any of the commissioners if we close? I'd like to close the record, so. Okay, I'm not seeing any. Please tell me if I'm missing a. I'm getting better at seeing the hands. All right. Okay, so the hearing's closed and we've closed the record. So I guess what I'd like to do is say to the, thank you very much. Well, I want to do a couple of things here. I'm going to move to give the commissioner some opportunity to ask questions of staff. I want to say before I do that, we're going to start our deliberations next week. We're scheduled to do them for a couple of weeks in a row, and people who are interested can watch that. The information about that's on our website, and you can watch the deliberations. And if you have questions about them or about viewing the deliberations, you can reach out to Althea. So with that, what I'd like to do is open it up and see if there are commissioners. I know Commissioner Ramey has. Do commissioners have any questions of staff before we head to deliberations? Commissioner Ramey.
Thank you, Chair Beeson. I do have a few questions following up on Commissioner Fregula and the 8 factors situation. This is a new one to us as a commission. And so I think staff needs to be really helpful about what is it that the OAR, in your interpretation, is requiring us to do? Is it weighing each of them separately? Is it making findings about each? Just so we're clear about that when it comes time to do that. So our findings can reflect whatever it is the OAR says we're supposed to be doing. The second thing was related to the plantings on the side. It was alleged that those were historic. And I think there was some question from the applicant about whether that's true or not. So staff should just spend some time looking at and I'll do this myself, but looking at the actual National Register application. Are any landscaping elements listed as significant to the application and or to the period of significance? So if they're not listed, then they're not significant. So I think it's a pretty simple test, and it may already be in the record, but I think it's a big enough issue that a little extra help would be helpful. And then the last thing is about the issue of delisting, and it seems like this maybe is in the record too. But again, for me personally, that's a pretty strong indication that we should. Well, no, we're going to pay the same amount no matter what. But anyway, opinions about whether our action would result in delisting or not is something I would like to know more about. And so, if you could just sort of tally those up and find out where they are, and again, I'm sure I could read it in the record myself, but I think it's an area of emphasis that we would benefit from. The last thing is the mitigation plan, and again, very important when you remove a historical structure from the community that we record that before we remove it. So I just want to be sure that's all in place. Sounds like it is, but just want to be sure that's all in place. So thank you. That's all I have.
Thanks. Do I have other comments, other questions from commissioners? Anything? Particularly anything you might be looking for staff to do in the next week or so, because we're going to reassemble a week from now. And okay, I'm not seeing any hands. All right. Okay, well, at this point, we've reached the end of the meeting, and I think what I'm going to do, I'm going to go ahead and close the meeting. I guess I want to say I had noticed we had a new commissioner who was in attendees. And I'm wondering if we can bring her over and at least say hello to her.
So my understanding is that
She's not there.
there is a new commissioner who intended to listen to this meeting so that she could participate in deliberations in the future, but or to review a recording of this meeting to participate, but was not available to participate as a commissioner this evening.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, so that's fine. And what we'll do, then I think I'll go ahead and close the meeting, and we will see everyone here next week, and we'll start deliberations.